Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, indexing with mutual funds, ETFs, options, annuities, and life insurance. Part 5 in our series on index investing. Are you going to buy indexes? You'd buy S&P 500 options. Think about that. Insurance companies use this for their annuities and their index universal life. They're buying options and hoping that it all works out where they can actually profit from it and then pass it on to the policyholders. Hopefully their caps are high and participation rates are high as well. Now, when I'm looking at this though, I'm looking at basic thinking here. I just want to know all the possible ways I can do indexing. Some of them in the insurance world, on the annuity and the index universal life, do not participate in dividends, but the variable universal life can. And then in other areas where you see full participation in any of the indexed fund stocks, ETFs, or the mutual funds, they participate in the dividends. That's no problem. You have that. But they also all have tax consequences, right? So if I'm in the non-qualified arena, that means that I could be paying, if I hold it long enough, capital gain treatment. If I don't hold it enough in time, I could be paying ordinary income tax. So it matters. Taxable issues matter. An annuity will let me defer the gain. I don't eliminate the gain. I don't get rid of it. All I do is defer it. I delay it for another time. I only pay taxes when I take constructive receipt. So annuity could be a play. In life insurance, when you're using indexing, especially the S&P 500, things of that nature, remember, if it's designed for cash accumulation and it's compliant under the TAMR rules, which are the old 1987-88 rules, if you can comply with that, you could be able to take your basis out free as well as your profits out free, as long as the contract is kept in force for the life of the policy insured. So there's some games to be played. Is it a tax issue? Is there dividend participation? Remember, because I just told you, annuities and index universal life don't have that. But what is in index universal life? It has a hedging protection, so you will never get negative numbers credited to your account. Now, I say that with a parentheses around it. Just remember, you still have policy expense loads that are coming out, and they could bring your numbers, your zero crediting year, it could be brought down, right? Just because you have policy bills to pay. But fundamentally, from a strictly crediting, because all financial products have costs to it, just depends on how much it is and how directly it affects it. So when I'm looking at all these areas, I want to see how it shakes out. There's a little bit here, a little bit of maybe new introduction of vocabulary that you may want to embrace here. How does an index fund shake out? How does a fund shake out? Most index funds are full replication funds. That means they buy all of the securities in the funds they track. So they're tracking them, they're buying them, right? They're not just looking and monitoring the situation, they're actually purchasing them. That is a full replication. They're replicating what they're looking at. Then you're looking at others are sample-based. Providers of these funds may use complex mathematical models to identify securities from among those in the index or look for a price inconsistencies of which they capitalize on. And some people look at sample-based as a way to go. I don't know if that's true or not. I leave that to your thinking. An enhanced index fund chooses selectively from a particular index portfolio in order to produce a slightly higher return. Remember, I talked about this earlier. I would like to cherry pick some of the good ones and leave the bad ones. If I saw consistent historicity where there were funds always dragging down my index, I might want to say, hey, maybe I want to construct my own and figure out if I could do that. And of course, if you want to go down that route, that's building your quant funds. Quant funds are named for their quantitative investment style. They aim to beat the index funds they imitate by relying solely on statistical analysis to decide which securities will top the benchmarks. For example, instead of buying all of the stocks in the S&P 500, a quant fund provider may buy selective funds from there and analyze them because they think they can get a higher return. People that are managing this at this micromanagement level, they know their stuff, and they're trying to outperform the S&P by cherry picking the great performers, dumping the ones that have some historical negative returns, and trying to build their own fund out. Now remember, I'm not going to do that. You shouldn't be doing that, and most registered investment advisors can give you some advice on that, but I don't know too many of them that are actually building quant funds. So these are some of the ways it shakes out. Whether you're in your index fund, is it a full replication? Everything that they monitor, they buy? Is it an enhanced index fund? Is it a quant fund? You want to be able to look at that and see the thinking behind it. And are the management fees, because now we may have some management fees to go along with this, because now we're doing that kind of sorting and that kind of sifting and trying to get to a different scenario. When I'm looking at this kind of a play and exchange traded funds, this is really economical. A lot of people like doing ETFs and indexing because it really seems to make sense. Now, I'm going to just walk you through this little bit of graphic here. Here's our participants. Securities go to their sponsors. The sponsors go to the security. The custodian will hold them. The ETF shares then are pushed back to the sponsor, and the ETF shares for sale out to people who want to participate. There's a cycle here. So there's the people who are buying. You're talking about the sponsors who's sponsoring the ETF fund, the custodian of the fund, and how the cycle moves in a cyclical pattern. Now, the reason I bring this up is when I'm looking at it, I want to look at all ways of indexing. Now, I've just mentioned this earlier in the Monday or Tuesday's show. I talked about this, that you now have access to indexing. You could buy options. I used to play in the S&P 500 index option. I did really well sometimes, and then sometimes I got my head handed to me. You have to know the risks. You have to understand, can you handle those risks? Because we're talking about securities again, and you could lose your money. So just keep in mind, that's a big deal to think about. But then we started saying, oh, I could buy an S&P 500 index in my mutual fund. I could buy an S&P 500 index, or any index, by the way, foreign or domestic. I could buy it inside my ETF. I could buy it inside an annuity. I could purchase it inside an index universal life contract. I could purchase it in a variable universal life contract. There's ways to do this. All of them have ramifications. As I said before, some of them are tax deferred. Some of them will be taxed at capital gain or ordinary income. Some will be tax-free as long as you obey the TAMRA compliance and keep the contract in force for the life of the policy insured. There's a lot of ifs there. You got to make sure you're crossing the T's and dotting your I's. I want to know which one's the best for me. The longer haul I go in indexing, and especially if it's non-qualified, I want to know if I can get some kind of tax advantages or tax favored. And sometimes I look at tax favored index annuities or tax favored index universal life because they have some tax favoredness to it, including variable if you can figure out if you can outperform the cost. It's a little more expensive to do variable universal life than is index. But keep in mind that there is also some attributes here. Remember, I love annuities because it defers my gains. I only have to pay it when I actually take constructive receipt. But I really like IUL for the long haul as long as it's the actual design of the contract is not only long haul, but it's minimal insurance, maximum accumulation. That's our goal in that regard. And that I tactfully take out withdrawals to basis and policy loans to gain in the appropriate years so I can maximize my returns. It could be the way to go in really what I call long haul horizon thinking, or in this case, especially for life insurance, it's going to be lifetime because you have to keep that in force for the lifetime of the policy insured. So it matters on the insurance side of that equation. But most people that are playing in indexing, they're playing midterm to long-term horizons. So if you're short-term under, unless you're playing the market and you have a lot of flexibility and liquidity, you should be not looking at indexing. It's a long haul thought process. I think you got to be in it for a long time. I like 10 years or more. If you think you can stomach the 10 years or less, remember, in that 10-year period that we call the lost decade, the market lost so much money over a 10-year period. There was no gain in it. That's why they called it the lost decade. If you were a millennial or a young Gen X or Y-er and you were starting out contributing to your 401k in 2001, 2, and 3, you took a bath. You were wondering, what should I do? Should I even be in an ERISA product? Should I even be in the market? It's killing me. So I'd hate to be a brand new person to the workforce, put my first retirement monies in, and see the first 3 years from 2001, 2, and 3 wasted just because the market was so punitive. So you just want to make sure that when you're thinking long haul, so people say, well, 10 years is kind of long, Steve, you shouldn't have any problem. Yeah, but after going through the lost decade, I like to now extend that past 10 years so I have a good chance of making a profit. By the way, a little side note, keep in mind that indexing and universal life contracts did actually perform about 6%, a little over 6%, but that did not include dividends and it did not include the expense loads from the policy coming out. So I'm trumpeting the gains on that, but I also want to say, hey, there were expense loads to come out. We might have made maybe a point and a half maybe, after all expenses were paid. But it was still positive compared to the rest of the decade for other investments. So just keep in mind, you need to know what you're getting. You can buy this, you can buy indexing in different platforms with different tax consequences, with different hedging protections, and different participation in actual dividends. It's all about indexing. All these indices are U.S. and domestic. It can be yours. You got to make sure you qualify for it through a risk tolerance test, and make sure you're talking with a registered investment advisor or an RIA, a registered rep, so that you can make sure you're getting people that have historicity and are licensed to sell it. I want to thank you for watching our series on index investing. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas you hear on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.